Hare Krishna. Well done. Very well done. Okay. Now comes the challenging time for so many young devotees to be charmed by the story of Grandfather Bhishma. Who is Grandfather Bhishma? What do you know about Grandfather Bhishma? To start with you, we'll go around. Say one thing that you know about Grandfather Bhishma. One thing. One thing. Why was he called grandfather? Who was he the grandfather of? Who was he the grandfather of? How was it that he was the grandfather of the Pandavas? Can you describe a little bit? How about you? So you can describe something, how he was the grandfather of the Pandavas. How did that happen? Okay, let's, I'll go slowly. Can you sit down and then I can see eye-to-eye contact with these young Vaishnavas? Do the ritual quick. Do the ritual quick. You get the garland ritual. Okay, let's go. Like this. So, let's go back. The Pandavas were called the Pandavas because their father's name was Pandu. So they're called the Pandavas, the sons of Pandu. But Pandu died when they were still your age, young fellows. And they were living in the forest because Pandu was to be the king, but he liked living in the forest. When he died, when Pandu died, everyone's paying attention, right? Especially because I'm going to ask you some questions too, so you better pay attention. When Pandu died, it was the advice of Vyasadeva that they should return to Hastinapur, so they returned to Hastinapur. And when they returned to Hastinapur, they didn't have a father, so their grandfather, Bhishma, became like their father. In the absence of their father, the grandfather took that responsibility to train these young teenagers, all 5 of them. Okay? So, how was it as soon as I start, they'll walk in, so they won't get disturbed again. Let's go back. Let's go way back. Who was Bhishma the son of? Who was Bhishma's mother and father? Bhishma's mother and father were Santanu and the mother, Ganga. What was Ganga doing on earth? We're going to do this is just history to keep you young devotees paying attention, not getting restless. That's what we're doing right now. What was Ganga doing on earth? Ganga was cursed to appear on earth by whom? By Lord Brahma. What? Why was Ganga cursed to come to earth. There was some service for her. The service for her was to become the mother of Bhismadeva, but there was another purpose. She was to assist the 8 Vasus. Around the same time, 8 Vasus were cursed by Vishvamitra. No, Vashishta. Vashishta cursed 8 Vasus to take birth on earth because these 8 Vasus, you know who the Vasus are? They're demigod personalities, many, many, many. They have 8 principal ones, and they're great warriors and heroes and so forth. So these 8 Vasus were traveling about, and they saw Vashishta's hermitage. They paid their respect because Vashishta is an amazing Brahmana, and the wife of one of the Vasus became attracted to Vashishta's cow. She asked her husband, "Can you get me the cow? I want the cow. I have a friend. I'd like to give the cow to my friend." So her husband said, "Sure." They waited till Vashishta went to take his bath, and they stole the cow. When Vashishta came back, being a great rishi, he knew he had capacity to know things he hadn't even yet seen, that they stole the cow. So he cursed them, that they should take birth on earth. They heard that he had cursed him. So they came back to Vashishta, "Here's your cow, please forgive us." He said, "No, this is, thanks for the cow, but this is a fit punishment for you for stealing the property of a Brahmana, because stealing the property of a Brahmana is a big deal." Do you know a story? Do you, any of you younger generation devotees? Hello? Do you know the story of when Krishna's pastimes, when someone stole the property of a Brahmana? He was a king, but it was a mistake. King Nrga. You don't know the story of King Nrga? He's shaking his head no. Any of you know the story of King Nrga? How about, do you know the story of King Nrga? Okay, it's story time, and this is for young people. I had a plan to do something else, but here we go. King Nrga was the son of Ikshvaku. Ikshvaku, we know from Bhagavad Gita. Who is Ikshvaku? In the 4th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says he taught the sun god Vivaswan this knowledge of Bhagavad Gita. Vivaswan taught it to his son, Manu. Manu taught it to his son, Ikshvaku. Yes? Krishna taught Bhagavad Gita to the sun god, who taught it to his son Manu, who taught it to his son Ikshvaku. Ikshvaku was a long time ago. And Ikshvaku came to this earthly realm to establish the kingdom of Ayodhya, because Ikshvaku was one of the descendants of Lord Ramachandra, or ancestors, not descendants, ancestors. So the son of Ikshvaku was named Nrga, Nrga, Nrga. And he was very, 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 that's 5 varies, very charitable. He gave away so many cows and so many gold and valuables and garments, and every day, abundant gift giving. But one day, misfortune happened. One of the cows he gave to a Brahmin wandered back into the herd of cows, and he gave that same cow to another Brahmin. And as the second Brahmin was heading back to his home with the cow, the first Brahmin said, "Wait a minute, that's my cow." He said, "No, it's my cow. The king gave it to me." So they went to the king to settle the dispute. The king said, my mistake. It was an accident. Take 1,000 cows and give me back this one cow. No. And they both left angry, and they cursed him. Some versions say he was cursed. Some versions say by taking the property of a Brahmana, he had to face Yamaraj. Yamaraj gave him a choice at the time of death. Yamaraj gave him a choice. What was the choice? The choice was, you suffer for this taking the property of a Brahmana first, and then you'll get all your piety like anything. You enjoy the heavenly planets for a long, long time. Or join the heavenly planet for a long, long time and then take your, the consequence of this theft of a property of a Brahmin. So he thought, let me get the problem out of the way and then I'll enjoy. So very well, Yamaraj said, you become a lizard. And immediately he became a lizard. And he became a lizard living in the bottom of a well, and it went for a long, long time. And much, much later, because Krishna's pastimes and prior to Ramchandra's pastimes, Ikshvaku, was a big, long time. So he was living like a lizard in the bottom of a well for a long time. He became really big, like a mountain inside a well. Krishna's children, their names are mentioned. They were out in the forest playing. They became thirsty. They wanted to get some water. They looked for some water. There wasn't any water in the well. There was a big lizard. They're compassionate. They wanted to help the lizard get out of the well. They tried to get him out of the well, tried this and that. They couldn't get him out of the well, so they went back and said, our dear father, can you help? This poor lizard, he's at the bottom of the well. Krishna said, sure. So Krishna came back. It's right in Krishna book, all of this I'm narrating. Krishna came back. He has powers. He extended his arm all the way to the bottom of the well, just touched the body of the lizard, and poof, the curse of becoming a lizard was over, and he manifested a form of a demigod, because that was his next destination. And Krishna, acting as if he didn't know what had happened, because Krishna is omniscient, he doesn't need to ask anything. But he asked, who are you? And how'd you get this body of a lizard? What's your story? So King Nrga said, you probably heard of me. He was a little proud. I was a very charitable king. There are many stories about me. I gave many, 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 many gifts to brahmanas, and I made a mistake, and that mistake resulted in my being cursed to become a lizard. But, thank you for liberating me. Thank you for liberating me. Hare Krishna. And with your permission, I'd like to go to my next destination. That's next destination. So Krishna gave him permission. An aircraft, a vimana, descended from heaven and escorted him very delicately to the heavenly realm, where he would stay for a long time, enjoying the fruits of his charity and pious activities. Krishna gave him a special benediction. When you're finished with all of that, you will come to me. So Krishna went back to Dwarka and informed his sons and all the citizens, because they were also listening, it's very, very dangerous. Just see, very dangerous to take the property of a Brahmin. Never make that mistake. Yes. Very good. You're paying attention. Good memory. So, Big mistake. So he cursed them that they would come to earth. So they descended to earth. They asked for a benediction, to reprieve. He said, "You'll get the following reprieve. 7 of you, shortly after your birth on earth, will be relieved of this reaction, and you'll come back to your Vasu position. But the one, his name was Dyo or Dhyo, Dio. That was his name. He's the one that actually stole the cow. So he's going to have to stay on earth for a long time. Long time. He'll be a great personality. Great personality. But he'll not marry. And he'll have to be engaged in many worldly affairs. So they descended and became sons of who? That we mentioned already. They became sons of Santanu, and Ganga. Very good. Very good. So what was Ganga doing? There's an explanation that there was a king who engaged in many, many, many pious activities. As a result, that king attained the heavenly realm. One time, the king was visiting Brahmaloka. And of course, Ganga was also there in Brahmaloka. And as fate would have it, the wind came and blew her garments, and the king was kind of charmed by the beautiful bodily features of Ganga. And Ganga noticed that he was looking at her, and she was looking at him. Their eyes made eye contact. Brahma saw the whole thing and said, "You both are going to have to descend into this material world. Ganga, you're going to have to go to the material world for some time due to this offense. This is inappropriate." And so that's what she was doing on the earthly realm. There's more details, and there's so many details in these Puranic stories. So that's why Ganga was on earth. She became the mother of the first 7 sons. When Santanu saw Ganga, it was love at first sight. He wanted to marry her. He didn't beat around the bush. "Please be my wife. I'm the king." And she said, "Well, listen to this, ladies. On one condition, that you'll never argue with me." Whatever I say, no disagreement, okay? "Oh, sure, no problem." So first son was born, and she threw him in the Ganga. But he wasn't supposed to say anything. 7 children happened. On the eighth son, she was ready to throw him in the Ganga. Stop! She said, "That's it. You broke your vow. I'm going to take this child, and you won't see me again. Goodbye." So what did Ganga do? She knew this arrangement, that the 8th son was going to become a great personality. So she had this 8th son, as he grew up, get trained by Vasishta. In scripture, boys, you're paying attention, right? Vasishta. Who's Vasishta? He's a great Brahmana. The same one, listen to this, the same one that had cursed the 8 Vasus to take birth on earth became the guru of number 8, the one that stole his cow. Just see how forgiving he was. He trained him in scripture. Parshuram, one of the principal Leela avatars of Krishna. When you see a painting of Parshuram, you see he's carrying a chopper. an axe, because he went on a rampage and removed the surface of the earth of demoniac kings. Although he was born in a Brahmana family. That's a long story. Brahmana, the Puranas have lots of long stories. So Parashuram became his teacher. And a third person who Ganga said to Santanu, she came back and brought, when their son had grown up to like a teenage, she brought him back, said, this is your son. Here's what happened. I had him trained by these 3 gurus. Parshuram to teach military, Vishishta to learn scripture, and the third one, I don't know too much about what this other person was, some kind of spiritual training. Huh? No, not Sukracharya. Something Shanta or something like that. So a third person. And then she my obligation to the Vasus had requested her, shortly after we're born, please make an arrangement that we can be immersed in the Ganga and go back to our Vasu positions. She made a commitment to them, and she returned to her position. So there was Santanu with a son. You follow everything so far? Because there's more. I came prepared. I didn't know it was going to be so many young people, but I'm prepared. So his name, she had given him a name, Deva Vrata. Deva Vrata. So Deva Vrata came to know after some time that his father's name was Santanu, right? His father had a very strong desire to marry a fisherman's daughter. Now that's not usual, that for a king to marry a fisherman's daughter. And the fisherman's daughter, her name was, starts with an S, Satyavati. You've heard that one before? Satyavati? Is this all new to you? Is it new to you? I'm asking you. It's new to you. Do you like stories? It's okay. Satyavati. Satyavati was the daughter of a fisherman. Here's some more story. How did she become the daughter of a fisherman? Srila Prabhupada writes in Canto 9, Srimad Bhagavatam, Chapter 22. The later chapters of Canto 9, Srimad Bhagavatam, are describing the lineage of kings in the Sun dynasty or Surya dynasty. Ikshvaku was one of those. From the sun god Vivaswan to Manu, Manu to Ikshvaku. Manu brought that line to this earth realm, and many other kings following him. The Surya dynasty and the Moon dynasty in the final chapters of Canto 9. So in that section, I'm going to read, Satyavati was actually the daughter of Vipari Chara Vasu by the womb of a fisherwoman known as Matsya Garbha. So Satyavati was actually the daughter of Vasu. We were hearing a lot about Vasus the last couple of days. What are the Vasus? Vasus are, so Bhishma was a Vasu. Anyway, I won't go into it. Yesterday we discussed one of Krishna's dearmost friends, in addition to Arjuna, one of Krishna's dearmost friends was Uddhava. Yes, Uddhava? Krishna says to Uddhava, or says about Uddhava, that in his previous life, Uddhava was a Vasu. And in the heavenly realm, the Vasus, with Brahma, were engaged in a yajna. And the desire of Vasu, this particular Vasu, was he wanted to be in a relationship with Krishna, in a friendly relationship with Krishna. So Uddhava took birth as a cousin, first cousin, Krishna's first cousin. Krishna's father was Vasudeva, and Uddhava's father was Vasudeva's brother, Devabhaga. Devabhaga was Vasudeva's father. He was Uddhava's father. So they were close, but he was previously a Vasu. So here's another Vasu. I did some research to find out what the heck is a Vasu anyways. And there's not a lot to say what a Vasu is, other than they have a post in the heavenly realm, and they're powerful Kshatriyas, and they do things to help protect the demigods when Kshatriya service is needed. There's not a whole lot said about them. Anyway, Upadichara Vasu was Satyavati's father, and there's many different narrations in the Puranas, and your head will spin if I tell you them, so I won't. But kings sometimes, well, here's a simple one. They're complicated. He had a number of queens. From those queens, he had 5 principal sons that were rulers of large kingdoms on earth. Upadicharu Vasu became known as a very powerful emperor under whom many kings were ruling. A large tracts of land on earth. There was another queen, and there's different versions of how this other queen became his queen. But while they were enjoying their activities together in a forest situation, some ancestors, Pitris, came to them and said, there's a particular ritual for worship of the forefathers. We would like you to assist us in the worship of the forefathers, please, because the elder son in Vedic culture is supposed to offer rituals to their ancestors. Shraddha. Shraddha. So he and his wife went to the forest. He went to the forest to seek a deer that was part of a ritual that they wanted. And he became overwhelmed with separation from his wife. It's far out. This emperor, then found a hawk and asked for the hawk to carry his seed to his wife so there could be pregnancy. The hawk agreed. As the hawk was flying, another hawk thought he was carrying something to eat. They had a big fight. The seed of the emperor fell into the sea, the seed of the emperor was swallowed by a fish. The fish happened to be an apsara who had been cursed, and as soon as that pregnancy of the fish occurred, the apsara was released from the curse, and the fish then bore twins. The fish was caught by a fisherman, brought to the king, Vasu, Vipicharu Vasu, and when they opened up the fish, they found twins. And one of the twins was Satyavati. But she smelled like a fish. So they gave her a different name. Matsya Gandha. It means she smelled like a fish. And the king decided to give Matsya Gandha to a fisherman to raise as his child, his daughter. He agreed. The son that came out of the fish became his son, and he made him the king of a kingdom, the Matsya kingdom. This is a Puranic story. So that's who Satyavati was. She wasn't exactly the daughter of the fisherman. She was the daughter, according to Srimad Bhagavatam, Prabhupada's purport. She, Satyavati, was the daughter of this Vasu, Viparicharu Vasu, in a very interesting, complicated way. But gee, same thing happened to Pradyumna. Very similar thing happened to Pradyumna. You with me with hearing stories? It's okay. I'm doing this for our younger generation folks over here. So if you don't want me to continue, I won't. If you want me to continue, I will. Should I continue? Okay. You know who is Pradyumna? Pradyumna? Go ahead. Krishna's son. Krishna's first son. Who was Krishna's first queen? Rukmini. And their first son was Pradyumna. But something very unfortunate happened. When Pradyumna was born, less than 10 days, doesn't say how many, less than 10 days after Pradyumna was born, he was kidnapped. Why was he kidnapped? He was kidnapped because a demon was told that this child, when he grows up, will kill you. So he went and kidnapped the child and threw the child into the sea. And the big fish swallowed him. A fisherman caught the big fish. When he was just a big fish, he gave it to the king. Wasn't a king, he was a demon. He gave it to the demon ruler. And the demon ruler said, thanks a lot. Send this big fish to the kitchen. So when they started opening the big fish, they found this child inside the body of the big fish. It turns out that child was Pradyumna. There's more to the story. Here's more to the story. You're nodding your head, so I'm going to keep going. There's more to the story. Pradyumna is in the spiritual world with Krishna. In the spiritual world, there's 4 primary personalities. Krishna, Balaram, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha, or Vasudeva, Sankarshan, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha. You've heard those names before? Vasudeva, that's Krishna. Sankarshan, that's Balaram. Pradyumna, and Aniruddha. Vasudeva, Sankarshan, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha. So he's in the spiritual world, Pradyumna. He is a Vishnu Tattva, same category as Krishna and Balaram, same category, Vishnu Tattva. And he's the original Cupid. That original Pradyumna in the spiritual world has a partial expansion. We discussed this yesterday. So, for those of you that weren't here with us yesterday, he has a partial expansion. And his partial expansion is Cupid. No, in the West, it's Valentine's Day. Right? What's Valentine's Day? It's Cupid, he's got his arrows, and Valentine's Day. So that Cupid idea comes from the Vedas. Because according to the Vedic text, there's a demigod who is a partial expansion of the original Pradyumna named Kamadev or Kandarpa. I don't know if any of you looked it up from yesterday. Bhagavad Gita, chapter 10, text 28, speaks of Kandarpa. Kandarpa is Cupid. Krishna says, I am of material romance. That's me, Kandarpa. It's one of Krishna's vibhutis. So, Kandarpa made a boo-boo. He wanted to test out his arrows with Lord Shiva, see what would happen. Big mistake. Lord Shiva became very angry. From his brow came fire, and it burnt the body of Cupid to ashes instantly. So that living entity that was Kandarpa had to go somewhere. So he entered back again into the body of the original Pradyumna in the spiritual sky. And there was a problem because Kandarpa has a consort. Cupid doesn't just fire arrows, he's got a wife. And the wife's name was Rati. And Rati was at a loss what to do. I want my husband back. So she went to Lord Shiva, please make an arrangement so I could have my husband back. See, the arrangement was that Pradyumna, that took birth as Krishna's first son, was her husband. And she had the service that she did for this demon was she was in the kitchen. And out of the fish's body came a little boy. Narada Muni came to pay a visit. Hey, guess what? That little child, that's your husband. You asked Lord Shiva for the benediction to get your husband back. There he is. Take good care of him. He's your husband. So that's what she did. And many things happened. They eventually went back to Dwarka, and husband and wife, Pradyumna and Rati. So that was the story to just to keep you all fully attentive, was about Satyavati was born from the body of a fish by carrying the seed, by a hawk carrying the seed of Vipicharo Vasu to his wife. Didn't make it to his wife. It was dropped and swallowed by a fish. The Apsara got delivered, and the twins that were born, son became Vipicharo Vasu's one of his rulers in his Matsya kingdom, and the daughter was given to a fisherman to raise. So it was that Satyavati later, Satyavati, Krishna, we're back to Santanu. Santanu was a king, the father of Deva Vrata, and the mother was Ganga. Santanu was passing some distance away, and he smelled not this bad fishy smell, Matsya Gandha. Her name changed. Her name got changed from Matsya Gandha to Satyavati. How did that happen? By the arrangement of Parshuram. You've heard of the name? No, excuse me, not Parashuram. Parashuramuni. Parashuramuni. Excuse me. Parashuramuni. Too many names. Who is Parashuramuni? Great sage. He is the speaker of Vishnu Purana. Vishnu Purana is one of the principal Sattvic Puranas. I'm going to wait till everyone's eyes are at the door now to see who's going to come in the door, and I'm going to stop until everyone's paying attention again. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna. Vishnu Purana. Prabhupada quotes Vishnu Purana a lot. It has many very important verses that describe Leelas of Krishna, but it also describes the energies of Krishna and how they work, and so forth and so on. It's a very important Purana, Vishnu Purana. The speaker, Parashuramuni. Parashuramuni became the father of Vyasadeva. And you all know who Vyasadeva is. You know who Vyasadeva is. The author of the Vedas, right? Vyasadeva. His father, Parashuramuni. How did that happen? Parashuramuni, one day, was going to cross the river. And he was going to cross the river by getting on a boat. And there was no boatman other than a lady. It smelled like a fish. Ganda, Matsyagandha. Because the fisherman thought that if my daughter gets the chance to take a sage across the river, she'll get some nice blessings by doing some seva for sadhu. So Parashuramuni got on the boat. He was doing some calculations, astrological calculations, and he understood this is in a very, very auspicious time, a time for an incarnation of the Supreme Lord to appear. So while crossing on the boat, he asked Satyavati, would you like to be the mother of an incarnation of Krishna? I'm not married. And he said, no problem. I can make an arrangement so you can become the mother of a child without losing your purity, your virginity. She said, well, how will that look if I'm walking around for 9 months and I'm pregnant? I'm not married. He said, no problem. The child will be born immediately. Just like that. Well, how's that going to work? Because we're in the middle of the river and everyone's going to see us. He said, no problem. By my mystic power, I'll create an island, a dvipa, and the child can be born on the island and no one will see. And you're a great sage, I take your word. So she became the mother of Vyas. Satyavati became the mother of Vyas before she was even married. And when Vyas appeared before her, he said he was in a fully matured adult form. If you ever need me in the future, just call my name and I'll be there. Hare Krishna. Krishna's there. Just call my name and I'll be there. She used that promise later, Satyavati. Parashuramuni was very pleased. Thank you. An incarnation of the Supreme Lord is now your son. I give you 2 benedictions. Instead of being an ordinary looking person, you'll be very, very beautiful. Second, instead of smelling like a fish, you'll smell very fragrant, and the fragrance will spread for miles. So she went back to tell Daddy. Let me tell you what happened today, Daddy. And, look at my form and smell this fragrance. He said, I accept. That a third benediction, your son will become the king. Very important. Your son will become the king. So when Santanu, who was the king, was passing through the area where the fisherman was, beautiful fragrance, became attracted, saw the beauty of his daughter, now Satyavati. So privately he requested the fisherman, I'd like to marry your daughter. I'm the king. I'd like to marry your daughter. He said, no. What? I'm the king. Your daughter will be the queen. No. Why no? Because my daughter has this benediction that her son will become the next king. And you already have an eldest son. So he'll be the next king. And so the answer is no. Poor Santanu. Cupid struck his heart, and he couldn't get Satyavati off his mind. She was very beautiful, very fragrant, and he wanted to marry her. So he became morose. He went back to the kingdom. His son, known as Deva Vrata, who later became Bhishma, went to the fisherman and said, my dear fisherman, could you give the reason why your daughter can't marry my father? Because my daughter has a benediction. Satyavati has the benediction that her son will become the king. But you're the Santanu's son, eldest son, so you'll become the king. So Devavrata said, no problem. I'll take a vow. I won't become king. He said, no good. Why is that? If you get married and your son is born before my daughter's son is born, then your son will become king. So he said, no problem. I'll take a second vow. I'll never get married. Which was exactly the curse or benediction, whichever, that Vishishta had given. You won't get married. So he didn't get married. He took a vow. He'll never get married. He never got married. He kept his vow. So the fisherman said, okay. So Santanu gave him a new name. Bhishma means terrible vow. And he gave him a benediction. You won't have to die unless you choose to. Pretty powerful king. Who can give that benediction? So he entrusted his daughter Satyavati to Bhishma. And Bhishma went with Satyavati back to his father and said, here she is. You wanted to marry her. Here's what happened. I've taken 2 vows. So this is when Santanu gave that benediction. You won't have to give up your body unless you choose to. So we're reading the section from Canto 1, Chapter 9, where Bhishma is deciding to leave his body. That's where we are. All of those nice, very involved stories was for all of you young devotees. So now you know many names. You probably, I don't know if you can remember all the names. But if you read Prabhupada's books, you read Krishna book, and you read the scriptural things instead of the other things that you have to read because of school. But it's summertime is a good time to read other things. So now I'm going to read, we'll do this. Canto 1, Chapter 9, Srimad Bhagavatam, is the passing of Grandfather Bhishma. And that's what we've been reading from in the evenings. And we're now, the earlier parts were on verse number 32. And prior to 32 comes right after the Kurukshetra battle. You all know the Kurukshetra battle. And after the Kurukshetra battle, there was some business to do. There was the funerals of all the deceased soldiers on the battlefield. And then there was the installing of Yudhisthira as the next king. And then they all wanted to go see Grandfather Bhishma, who was still lying on the battlefield with body riddled with arrows. So Krishna came with the Pandavas and many sages, etc., etc. Bhishma, there's a long list of people that came to create auspiciousness at the time of his leaving this world. And what did Bhishma do? He was expressing to Yudhisthira, the new king or emperor, that he saw that he was very, very sad. He was feeling sad because on account of me, so many people have been killed. What a bad person I am. Why? So that I can become king? How horrible. What a bad person I am. So he knew that he was feeling like that. He didn't say it. He could just feel it, see it. So he pacified him in many, 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 many ways. Long section. And then he started speaking about Krishna. And then glorifying Krishna in many nice ways. Understanding Krishna as the personality of Godhead. And although he's independent and supreme, here he is coming before me at this most important hour so I can see his form when I'm leaving this world. Then Yudhisthira essentially said, if I'm going to be king, you convince me that this is what Krishna wants, to rule the world. Can you give me instructions how to rule the world? Now, normally that's not the question you ask a dying man. But he's Grandfather Bhishma. So he gave very elaborate, in the Mahabharata, it's a very elaborate discussions on how to be an ideal king. And when he completed that long narration, that's where we are. He's now the son for yogis. It's right in chapter 8 Bhagavad Gita. We read the whole section the other day. Chapter 8 Bhagavad Gita describes how yogis calculate when to leave their body, because there's some yogis that can leave their body at will, or they don't even have to leave their body. They go wherever they want to go, in this world or in beyond this world. The yogis have powers that ordinary people don't have. So one of those powers is to relinquish their body at a time when it's going to lead them to the heavenly or the spiritual realm. Attaining the supreme is chapter 8. So he knew how to do that, Bhishma. So it waited till the sun started moving in the northerly direction. In the solar calendar, it's January 14. It's Makara Sankranti. It's a very important day celebrated in the Vaishnava calendar in India. And he's now finishing his worldly business and fixing his mind completely on Krishna. So that's where we are. Don't do that. Ready? Bhismadeva said, let me now invest my thinking, feeling, and willing, which were so long engaged in different subjects and occupational duties, in the all-powerful Lord Sri Krishna. He is always self-satisfied, but sometimes, being the leader of the devotees, he enjoys transcendental pleasure by descending on the material world, although from him only the material world is created. So it's two parts. The second part is Krishna's position as the creator of the material world. The medium through which Krishna creates the material world is the Purusha avatars. What's the Purusha avatars? Playing Mridanga. The Purusha avatars are forms of Vishnu that deal with material creation. The Purusha avatars are expansions of Krishna from the spiritual world for the purpose of material creation. So through the Purusha avatars, he's saying, through the Purusha avatars, Krishna creates. And yet, although it's from him, he sometimes, from time to time, he comes himself. And here he is, before me, by his mercy. And the former part is describing some of the vibhutis or characteristics of Krishna. I was studying something today, and I learned, you'll like this, Krishna's manifests himself by his Svarup Shakti. Shakti means potency. His own potency, Svarup Shakti, manifests his form. But his form has characteristics. And the characteristics are manifested by his Sandini Shakti. The features of Krishna's form, his garments, everything is by his spiritual form, by the subpotency of his Sandini Shakti. And his characteristics, such as always self-satisfied, sometimes being the leader of the devotees, he's enjoying transcendental pleasure. Krishna's enjoying transcendental pleasure wherever he is through the agency of his Hladini Shakti, personified by Radharani, but it's she and he are inseparable. So let's read what Prabhupada writes in his purport. Because Bhismadeva was a statesman, the head of the Kuru dynasty, a great general, and a leader of the Kshatriyas, his mind was strewn over so many subjects, and his thinking, feeling, and willing were engaged in different matters. Now, in order to achieve pure devotional service, he wanted to invest all powers of thinking, feeling, and willing entirely in the Supreme Being, Lord Krishna. He is described herein as the leader of the devotees and all-powerful. These are Shaktis. He's the leader of devotees and he's all-powerful. Although Lord Krishna is the original personality of Godhead, he himself descends on earth to bestow upon his pure devotees the boon of devotional service. He descends sometimes as Lord Krishna, as he is, and sometimes as Lord Chaitanya, personality of Godhead. He's speaking of Krishna's before him, but Prabhupada is taking, when Krishna descends, he assumes different forms and features. One of them is Lord Chaitanya. Both are leaders of the pure devotees. Pure devotees of the Lord have no desire other than service of the Lord, and therefore they are called Satvata. Satvata. It's right in the verse. So explaining the meaning, Satvata. Krishna is the leader of the Sattvatas, pure devotees. Naturally, he's the leader. The Lord is the chief among such Sattvatas. Bhismadeva therefore had no other desires. Unless one is purified from all sorts of material desires, the Lord does not become one's leader. Desires cannot be wiped out, but they have only to be purified. It is confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita by the Lord himself that he gives his instruction from within the heart of a pure devotee who is constantly engaged in the service of the Lord. Tesham satata yuktanam bhajatam priti purvakam tadami bodhi yogam tam yenamam upiyanti te. Do any of our young devotees here know that verse? Tesham satata, young devotees, not the Prabhus. Tesham satata yuktanam bhajatam priti purvakam Dadami bodhi yogam tam yena mam upayanti te. You know the verse? You know the verse? No? Okay. You look like you were saying it. He was saying it. You know the verse? Okay, well, let's just do it one more time. I'll say it, and those of you that know it, everyone in the room that knows the verse can say it. Tesham satata yuktanam bhajatam priti purvakam dadami bodhi yogam tam yena mam upayanti te. Some of you do know the verse. Just you need a little help. Train your wheels for a bicycle, right? So it's one of the four. This verse is one of the four essential verses of the whole Bhagavatam, 10th chapter. Dadami Bodhi Yogam Tam. Krishna gives Bodhi Yoga. He gives the intelligence, Yena Mamu Payanti Te, by which you can come to him. Who does he give that to? Antesham Satata Yuktanam. Those who are always engaged. Bhajatam, with devotion. Priti, purvakam, with love. So Krishna gives the knowledge how to come to him to those who want to come to him. And how do they show they want to come to him? With love. Always offering everything. That's the leader of the Sattvatas, Krishna. Such instruction is given not for any material purpose, but only for going back home, back to Godhead. Bhagavad Gita 10:10. 4. The ordinary man who wants to lord it over material nature, the Lord not only sanctions and becomes a witness of activities, but he never gives the non-devotee instructions for going back to Godhead. Now that's a verse from the 13th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. It's situated in the heart. Situated in the heart, Krishna does two things. He oversees, upadrashta. Drashta means to see. Upadrashta, he oversees. And anumanta. Cha. He also permits. He oversees and he permits. But that's for everybody. But for the devotees, he gives, here's how you can go back to Godhead. Now, the non-devotees can't hear it. It's just like, what? They can't hear it. Why they can't hear it? They don't want to surrender to Krishna. They want to be enjoyers. Me. They want to be enjoyers. And bhakti means Krishna is the enjoyer. So Krishna doesn't give the understanding to those persons how to come to him. He doesn't give buddhi. He doesn't give spiritual intelligence. They got the other kind, the material intelligence kind. No problem. That is the difference in dealings by the Lord with different living beings, both the devotee and the non-devotee. He is the leader of all living beings. As the king of the state rules both the prisoners and the free citizens. But his dealings are different in terms of the devotee and non-devotees. Non-devotees never care to take any instruction from the Lord, and therefore the Lord is silent in their case. Although he witnesses their activities and awards them the necessary results, good or bad, the devotees are above this material goodness and badness. They are progressive on the path of transcendence, and therefore they have no desire for anything material. The devotee also knows Sri Krishna as the original Narayana, because Lord Sri Krishna, by his plenary portion, appears as the Karanadakshayi Vishnu, the original source of all material creation. This is going into the second half of this verse. He knows that Krishna is the creator, so he knows of cosmic manifestation, and that's the Vishnu forms, these Purusha avatars I mentioned. The Karna Dakshay Vishnu, Garbha Dakshay Vishnu, Shira Dakshay Vishnu. Bhismadeva knows all this. That's him. He's the original Narayan. But sometimes he comes. And why does he come? It's his pleasure. He enjoys being with the Sattvatas as the leader of the Sattvatas. He likes. So he comes. He is not forced by the conditions of material nature. He is therefore described here as the Vibhu, or the Almighty, for he is never conditioned by the laws of material nature. Very different evening, huh? There's one more thing I wanted to do. I think I'll do it because it's really short. This verse, these verses, there's a series of verses spoken by Bhismadeva, and they're really important because he's an important person. As you all know, most of you know, Bhismadeva is one of the 12 great authorities. How do we know he's one of the 12 great authorities? Because one of those 12 states them. One of those 12 is Yamaraj. One of those 12 is Prahlad Maharaj. And Yamaraj is giving the statements of who are the 12 Mahajans. His name comes at the end, but Bhismadeva is one of those great authorities. He's a very important person. So this section where he is now speaking directly about Krishna, and at the time of his death, he's preparing his mind to be completely focused on Krishna, and his intelligence completely focused on Krishna, because it's the stage of yoga. Some of you know what yoga is. Everybody knows what yoga is. One of the main systems of yoga is the eightfold yoga system, or Ashtanga. Ashta means 8, and Anga means limbs, the eightfold yoga system. And what he's doing right now is Anga number 5. What's Anga number 5? Pratyahara. He's withdrawing his senses within. So that the prior 4, yama, niyama, asana, and pranayama. So many people, when they go to yoga classes, they do asanas. They just skip the first 2. The do's and do nots, they just don't pay any attention to that stuff. They just do asanas because it feels good. It makes you healthy and you can lose some weight and it's nice. But it's part of a larger system. And then there's pranayama. There's breathing. Some yoga teachers teach pranayama too. And then the purpose of that is to concentrate the mind and control the senses. Then comes number 5. That's what Bhismadeva's doing. He's withdrawing his senses from worldly activity. It's not like, it's something like the verse in Bhagavad Gita where Krishna speaks like a tortoise can withdraw his limbs within the shell. It's not like Bhismadeva's arms went inside his body or something like that. It means the subtle senses, because there's gross instruments, but there's something subtle behind the gross. The sense of sight works through the eye, but the power of sight is one of the senses. The sense of touch works through the skin, but the sense of touch is a subtle sense. The sense of smell works through the nose, but it's the subtle sense, etc. So he withdrew his subtle senses from the sense objects. And he's consolidating, pratyahara is consolidating within the mind. It's a very advanced stage of yoga. And then comes degrees of concentration of the mind upon the Supreme. That's the last three. Dhyana, Dharana, and Samadhi. That makes 8. 5 plus 3 is 8. That's the Eightfold Yoga system. And he's doing it, but he's not just fixing his mind on a candle flame, he's fixing his mind on the personality of Godhead. That's what yoga is meant to do. Ashtanga yoga is meant to do that. The Patanjali yoga system describes it in detail, the Eightfold Yoga system. Very interesting. We're going to, during the Festival of the Holy Name, I don't know if you're planning to come, but those of you that are going to be able to come over the 4th of July weekend, I'm going to touch on the Patanjali yoga system and what Patanjali says about mindfulness. Because that, mindfulness is a buzz these days. It's become so popular that it's used in business, the mindful manager. Right in Chicago, when going to a program at University of Illinois at Chicago, we were going through downtown because the university is downtown, and there was a big store, home of the Mindful Burger. Anyway, mindfulness is not burgers. Mindfulness is not business. Mindfulness is Ashtanga yoga. And Patanjali has things to say about it, and it can be useful for us in our mantra meditation if we understand the principle that Patanjali teaches, the principle of how to apply yoga system properly. And Bhismadeva is demonstrating it. And Bhismadeva is also demonstrating what to do when you're on notice that you're going to leave your body. I don't know if some of you probably know this, maybe many of you know. Kadamba Kanada Swami is on notice. The doctors diagnosed that he has a type of cancer that's incurable, and maximum, probably, maybe longer, maybe lesser, but around 1 year. So he's doing the Pratyahara program and fixing his mind on Krishna. And he's sending out some really interesting messages here and there, forwarded to some devotees. It's important because whatever the age is, at some point we're going to leave this world. And the Bhagavatam is focused on that. Maharaj Parikshit is cursed to die in 7 days. Bhismadeva is imminent. He's going to depart. What do you do when that notice comes? What's Kadamba Kanana Swami supposed to do? What are we supposed to do? Because it's going to come. It may not be with a notice, but when that comes, it's coming. Who knows? So what do you do? So it's important to know ahead of time what to do. And so he's doing this Pratyahara program. So it's a very important section. I'm going to read 2 places from commentary by our acharyas where this verse is commented upon. One of them is in Jiva Goswami's Krishna Sandarbha. Jiva Goswami's Krishna Sandarbha. And he refers to this verse in the following way. The translation is a little different than BBT. Here it goes. At the end of my life, I offer my thoughts to you, Bhagavan, full of 6 qualities, best of the Yadus, superior to all other forms of the Lord, absorbed in bliss with your associates, and who, as a pastime in the form of the Purusha avatar, Vishnu, right? Sometimes accepts Maya by your glance, which produces the material world. And Sridhar Swami's commentary on this verse is, quote, Bhishma offers his work to Krishna in order to pray for rati to Krishna. Rati means absorption, contraction, loving attraction, rati. The highest goal. Vibhu ni means Krishna in comparison to whom no one has any comparable greatness. Krishna has supreme power. He is endowed with the highest bliss arising from his Swarup. He's his own spiritual form. He doesn't need happiness from something else. It's from within him. He sometimes accepts Prakriti for play, means material creation. He is not like the jiva who is dependent with his Swarup covered. His play is described. From this play, the sequence of creation manifests. Creation is also his leela, or his play. Interesting. One more, because now Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur is going to comment something. Let's see here. Oops. Well, help. Yeah. Okay. This is very creative. This is Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur commenting on this verse. And he says this verse and the next verse, they go together. At the end of my life, my thoughts are offered to the Lord. Since my master has come to me at the time of my passing away under the influence of his mercy, I must give him a gift. There is nothing suitable in this abode, possessiveness and ego, in this abode of possessiveness. So what can I give to him in this place that there's just possessiveness and ego? Therefore, I make a gift of my thoughts alone. Krishna. But in this world, we see people who give, they also desire to take. Bhishma. My thoughts are without desire. I offer them to Bhagavan, who is full of 6 wonderful qualities. Krishna. But the Lord is famous as Narayana. Bhishma. No, he is famous as the best of the Yadu dynasty. In addition to Narayana, he is intimately associated with his devotees. But Narayana is greatly famous as Bhagavan for all time. Bhishma. There is no greatness superior to his. He is the source of Narayana. He attains the highest bliss with his own Yadus and Pandavas. The main qualities of the Lord have thus been described. The intimacy of Krishna's activities with his loving devotees, in other words. And then next is the Purusha Avatar section. The secondary qualities are described. You contact Maya by glancing for evolving Mahatattva, from which arises the sequence of material creation. You do this in your forms of the Purusha avatars. So we covered quite a range. I mean, the storytelling and so many Puranic stories, your head will spin. And Bhishma's position and preparing oneself for the time of death. And, suitable ways to fix your attention on the personality of Godhead. If your grandfather Bhishma, you can do it the best because he's one of the 12 Mahajans. And we learn from these great personalities by hearing from them. We're learning about them and we're learning about Krishna from them. Now, I don't know where all of you parked. It was very difficult out there finding parking spaces. But congratulations for somehow making it here. Let's see if there's some discussion.
So,
online question.
So this is from Hirshta. How do we maintain a sense of urgency in Krishna consciousness without becoming stressed or working under pressure? How do we maintain urgency without becoming stressed or working under pressure?
You go from material to spiritual. Because material urgency means something like danger or fear or, some kind of negative emotion where you're not feeling protected. And then you could feel protected and then become complacent. That's pretty easy. So the sense of urgency has to do, it's you move to the spiritual position. You won't get there. You won't get to a sense of urgency that's without stress and, and negative emotions if you don't have a spiritual position. That, say it the other way. Well, if you have the material position, then there's a sense of urgency when you feel danger. And when danger passes, you become complacent. So to maintain the position of urgency, you have to move to the spiritual position. So how do you move to the spiritual position? You follow the process of removing the coverings and awakening our dormant consciousness. You follow sadhana bhakti carefully in good association. So the short two-word answer, sadhu sangha. How to? Sadhu Sangha. How does the next thing? Sadhu Sangha. Because Sadhu Sangha unpacked means to do all these things nicely. And to stay fixed in doing them nicely is Sadhu Sangha. If you start to become complacent, somebody will bump you in the, ribs and say, hey, you're getting complacent. Or you're heading for the ditch or something like that. Something else in the room? You have something.
Yes, Maharaj.
Yeah.
Bhismadeva, we come to know that he is one of the Mahajana.
Bhismadeva is one of the Mahajans.
Yeah, but as a Mahajan, how he fought against Krishna? That is.
Oh, we discussed that. You can ask Aruta, she knows.
No, we come to know about the surrendering. There are six basic items of surrendering.
Here's a short answer. Short answer. You ready for a short answer? Bhismadeva has a eternal relationship with Krishna as servant. She knows. Sthayi bhava is dasya. So since his relationship with Krishna is dasya, how does he act against Krishna? Answer. Secondary rasa. What's secondary rasa? Chivalry. Krishna enjoys. So let me bring my master some pleasure by giving him a tussle. taking a position opposite to him, giving him a tussle for his pleasure. It's a secondary rasa. Chivalry is a secondary rasa for Krishna's pleasure. And he derives pleasure giving Krishna pleasure. When it's coming up, you read it, you wait till we get there. Although he's seeing Krishna before him, his mind is absorbed in the vision of Krishna coming to smash him with Arjuna's broken chariot wheel. Chivalrous rasa. His face is covered with hooves, with the dust raised from the hooves of the horses. Beads of perspiration are coming down the side of his face. His arm is raised with Arjun's chariot wheel. His upper garment is blowing behind him because he's moving so fast. And he's ready to smash him with the wheel. Chivalry rasa. His pleasure is Krishna's pleasure. Because Krishna didn't smash him. Something stopped it. What stopped it was the conch blew. Sun setting, boo. Krishna stopped. Bhishma dropped his weapons. When Krishna's coming to smash him, that was it. That was what he wanted. That's what Krishna wanted, was that loving, in exchange with Bhishma, his dear devotee. That's how. There's other things to say, but that's a nice one.
One very small question, like if I heard correctly, Vasishta was one of the gurus of Devavrata.
Yes.
So that means Dronacharya and Vasishta, they existed like
Say it again. The microphone is moving around, but your mouth is staying in one place.
So that means Vasishta, like he was in Treta Yuga and now also he's there.
Yeah, there's things like that are very puzzling, but yes.
And
yes, there's Chiranjivas that live a long time. Vashishta is one. Anybody else? Up front here?
Maharaj, in the purport that you read from Bhagavatam, there's one line which is confusing me.
Speak slowly. I got it, but speak slowly and clearly.
So I'm reading the line. Although Lord Krishna is the original personality of Godhead, he himself descends to earth to bestow upon his pure devotees the boon of devotional service.
Yes.
So my question is, Maharaj, pure devotees, they already have devotion, pure devotion. So,
well, do you have pure devotion?
So here it is written pure devotees. I don't.
So do you want Krishna to come? Now he can do that through representatives too. But he's very loving. He'll sometimes come himself. When he does come, that's one of the things that he does. From Bhagavad Gita. Boys, see if you can say this verse with me. Paritranaya sadhunam vinachaya jaduskatam dhamma sangstapanarthaya sambhavami yuge yuge. So one of the three things that Krishna does is that one. He doesn't have to, but when he does, that's one of the things he does. Over here.
Maharaj, you mentioned about Parashara Muni, and he's mentioned also in Bhagavatam as the guru of Maitra Muni who spoke the Bhagavatam to him.
Yes.
So, so my question was that, so he's also the father of Vyasadeva.
Speak slowly.
So he was also the father of Vyasadeva,
Yes.
and he fathered Vyasadeva, and he spoke the Bhagavatam to Maitra Muni also, right? Like
He spoke the Bhagavatam too.
Maitra Muni.
Well, he spoke to Shukadev Goswami spoke the Bhagavatam to lots of people. Vyasadeva taught it to Shukadev, but in the audience there were a lot of people. So, what was your point?
No, but in
Is
Cantos,
this a chronology question?
yeah, like Bhagavatam is spoken at different levels. Like the line for Maitreya Muni was separate, right?
Which?
Because Maitreya Muni.
Yeah.
You know, because before he starts speaking the Bhagavatam to Vidura, he traces how he got the Bhagavatam, how he received the Bhagavatam, right?
I'm listening.
So, so he mentions that he received the Bhagavatam from his guru Parashara Muni, who received it from Sankhayana Muni, who received it from Sanat Kumar, who received it from Lord Shankarshan.
So they're different. So your question is, it sounds contradictory. So how do we unravel the contradictory?
Yeah.
Well, I'll add to the contradiction. You ready? Who was the guru of Uddhava?
Brihaspati. Yes.
One of the gurus of Maitreya was also Brihaspati.
Yes. Yeah. Oh.
Adding to the complication. It doesn't answer your question. Just so these persons heard from many sources, and the form of the Bhagavatam that Maitreya said that he heard from, this line of teachers, may not be the same Bhagavatam that we have, the 18,000 verses. Another iteration of the Bhagavatam. The detail I don't have the answer to. It's a nice question. But just like there's, how many Mahabharats are there? When we hear Brihad Bhagavatamrita, we hear that it's an explanation of Mahabharata that wasn't Vyasadev's Mahabharata. Correct? So there are other iterations of Mahabharata, and one possible answer to this question, there may be other iterations of Srimad Bhagavatam from which Maitreya had heard, to that line of teachers. I don't have the answer. It's a good question. And I'll see if I can find somebody that's, Puranic whiz kid or, scholar that has the answer to that one. But that's a possibility. There are other iterations.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. My question is about Brihaspati.
About Brihaspati.
Yeah. So I read in the 4th canto, Prabhupada says that he is a Brahmavadi or Mayavadi. So I was just puzzling, because he is the priest of the demigods and he is also the guru of many great personalities. So it talks about he's actually Brahmavadi and for Kama he says Mayavadi. So that's what it's confusing.
I'd have to see the context, and I can't respond because it is. Not right now, please. It won't help. Why Prabhupada wrote like that, I don't know. Because if this and if that, then how can he be a Mayavadi? Because the demigods aren't Mayavadis. And Maitreya is not a Mayavadi. Now, Maitreya was very vastly learned, but Maitreya was not on the same platform as Uddhava. But by hearing from Krishna, Krishna speaking to Uddhava, he became very elevated, further elevated. There's some discussion about that, and I think it's chapter 13 of the Bhagavatam. I can't remember exactly where, but he became further qualified by hearing Krishna speaking. But it wasn't that he wasn't learned before he heard Krishna speaking. Obviously. But yeah, this particular reference, Brihaspati, Mayavadi, I don't know. Anything over on this side? We have another wing over here. Anything out there? Okay. Yes? No? No. Okay. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. You have another question? Okay.